Hello, welcome to Encore. Thanks for joining us. I'm Richelle Harrison Plesse. Coming up on this week's cinema show.
It's coming back round.
What do these pictures mean to you yourself?
Oh, they've become more or less the most important part of my life. I can't imagine now living without them.
The Guggenheims progressed from selling door to door to having these enormous fortunes.
Peggy is a sort of model for the liberated woman.
And to talk about those movies, I'm joined by our film critic, Lisa Nesselson. Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
Now, we kick off with Dunkirk, the latest blockbuster from director Christopher Nolan. But unlike his previous work, The Inception or the Dark Knight trilogy, this film is based on a true story when during the Second World War, the German offensive forced 400,000 Allied troops into a chaotic evacuation from the beaches of Dunkirk.
You know, I'm embarrassed to say that while the Battle of Dunkirk in the spring of 1940 and the evacuation that followed was a major, major moment in the history of World War II, I didn't know that much about it. But when I spoke with my French colleagues, I learned that they knew even less about it. It's a very, very anchored in Britain story. As writer and director Christopher Nolan put it at the preview, this is my first time telling a true story. It's very familiar to British people. It's part of our culture. There's a balance you have to take between historical accuracy and entertainment. Hopefully, we've created a suspenseful and immersive experience on our beloved 70mm format. He has definitely succeeded using boats and planes from the era and putting viewers in the shoes or boots of men on land, at sea, and in the air. Let's take a look.
The ship's about to leave.
Down you go.
Torpedo!
They need to send more ships. Every hour the enemy pushes closer. They've activated the civilian boats. Civilians? We need destroyers.
Nolan knows how to play with space and time, as seen in his films The Prestige, Inception and Interstellar. But Dunkirk also juggles time. It's a triptych with a story told from three different perspectives.
It's a very trippy triptych. He spells it out right away, but I will admit that because I hadn't read anything about it, the reviews weren't out yet, I didn't know what he was up to until about a half hour of watching what he was up to. And the reviews have been so positive that I'm worried there may be a short of superlatives for weeks to come in the English-speaking world. And there's a potential downside to that because the average filmgoer may go and wonder what all the fuss is about. So those three components, locations, narrative balls to be juggled, are announced by words on the screen as follows. The mole, 1 week. The sea, 1 day. And the air, 1 hour. But you're just starting to watch the movie and you don't really get what that means. So I was at sea about what was happening on land because I had never heard the term mole used to describe a pier or a jetty, little critters underground or something on your face, yes. But the water is shallow, so ships could not come up to that mole. And the English Channel is 26 miles wide, and they needed to get as many of the 400,000 hungry and thirsty men stranded there across it as they could. Churchill would like to have 30 to 40,000 men back. Why? Because, as an officer says, Britain's next and then the rest of the world. Sobering and true. There's really not much dialogue, which is unusual for Nolan. Images convey everything, and it's about the nature of war, which you can die a stupid death, you can die a heroic death. The war itself really doesn't care. Nobody mentions a wife or a girlfriend back home. Everyone is in the moment, and we are in the moment with them. The English Channel is, of course, an accident of geography. A soldier is supposed to fight for his country, but these guys are just trying to survive, do their best. Many of the evacuees actually felt ashamed not to have accomplished more. But here's what writer-director Christopher Nolan has to say.
I wanted to strip the convention and the artifice of Hollywood filmmaking away from it and try and create what I call a present tense narrative, try and just jump in and create empathy for the characters by virtue of their physical situations, by virtue of the jeopardy and suspense they're facing.
Now, Christopher Nolan is part of a small group of prominent filmmakers who still shoot on film instead of digitally. How important is that, Lisa?
Well, would you ask a painter how important his paint or his canvas is? Now, I wouldn't suggest that writers should go back to quills and dipped in ink because Voltaire wrote that way, and boy, was he a good writer. But celluloid film has a different quality, and it's one we're on the brink of losing forever. Nolan has been politely vocal about this, warning that we're in danger of losing an art form if we let celluloid lapse, if we stop manufacturing, exposing, developing, and projecting film, because it's a technology that served us well for over 100 years. He not only shot on film, he shot on 65 millimeter IMAX. So I solemnly swear, repeat after me, I will go to the theater. I will not download this. I will see this at the movies.
I will definitely see it at the movies. Looking forward to it. Now, moving on to a film that also includes World War II, Tom of Finland, which is out this week here in France. It's about the Finnish artist Touko Laaksonen, who served in the country's military before developing his talents as a visual artist of homoerotic images. Now, they were controversial at the time, but are now widely regarded as a major influence on 20th century gay culture.
I have to say, I have always adored the unapologetically gay male artwork of the artist known as Tom of Finland since I first saw it, and I was moved pretty much to tears by this film about his life. The guy who directed it worked about 25 years to get it right. When I went to the press screening, for some reason I thought I was going to see a documentary about an artist whose draftsmanship and creativity in depicting these exaggerated, hyper-masculine men who are proud of their bodies and muscles is very special. But what I got was this incredibly touching account of the artist's life with actors playing Touko, better known as Tom of Finland, and his lovers and his sister and publishers and various authority figures. Now, World War II comes into the picture because Touko ended up killing a Russian soldier, and that haunted him and affected his imagery for the rest of his life. And he met an officer who gave him a cigarette lighter, which will reappear in much dicier circumstances. In retrospective, this is something the film absolutely excels at. It's hard to believe just how oppressively uncool it was to be gay until fairly recently in human history. Being gay was illegal, frowned upon, could definitely ruin a career. Gay men had been trading Tom's drawings since the 1960s, and the scenes where Touko goes to the U.S. to meet his representatives there are absolutely adorable and funny. But in 1998, the fine art publisher Taschen brought out a book called The Art of Pleasure, which introduced the rest of the world to Tom of Finland's incredible illustrations. This is a rich historical tale full of suspense and romance and humor. And I have here Bon Bon the Bondage Bear, who some of our viewers may remember because Bon Bon helped me review 50 Shades of Grey and Roman Polanski's Venus in Fur. So could you tell me, is this up to snuff? Is this the kind of film everyone should go out and see? He gives it 4 leather rings. Absolutely.
Well, that one's definitely going on the list as well, Lisa. Next, let's counter all the testosterone of Dunkirk and Tom of Finland with a documentary about a fascinating woman, art collector, socialite and heiress Peggy Guggenheim. She was a central figure, of course, in the modern art movement. Tell us about Peggy Guggenheim, Art Addict.
Well, we've all heard the name Guggenheim, Guggenheim Museum, Guggenheim Grant, and if you haven't heard it, then you're hearing it here first. And like the name Rothschild or Rockefeller, it conjures extraordinary wealth, the kind where there is always enough money to sustain a lavish lifestyle. And then even after paying taxes in a high tax bracket, there's still enough left over to endow grants and foundations and museums. So there's the Solomon Guggenheim Museum in New York, the Guggenheim in Bilbao, and the Peggy Guggenheim Museum in Venice. She brought outrageously modern art to what was then the very staid, old-fashioned city of Venice. Now, Peggy Guggenheim's family money came from mining. One of the things that jumps out at me about her incredible life is that her father went down with the Titanic when she was only 13. Now, a lot of priceless art also went down with that ship. Peggy collected and exhibited the most important and influential artists of the second half of the 20th century. She pretty much put Jackson Pollock on the map. Her art gallery in Manhattan after World War II showed everybody who was anybody or who was going to be anybody. In fact, Robert De Niro is in the documentary talking about how both of his parents exhibited at her gallery.
I didn't know that his parents were both both artists.
Absolutely. So he took another artistic route. But yeah, Peggy was an early enthusiast for plastic surgery, but she told her surgeon to stop in the middle of a nose job because it hurt too much. And so she went through life with a sort of cauliflower nose after that. However, she does mention that she had 7 abortions, which would have been illegal then. And when asked why, she says, well, I wasn't married to the man, and that simply wasn't done then. So, how times have changed. Now it's pretty much okay to have a child out of wedlock, but it's getting harder and harder to have access to an abortion. Peggy wrote her own tell-all autobiography, stating the names of the men she'd slept with, the way a man might brag about how he bedded a starlet or some incredibly
She collected a lot of lovers,
She
didn't
did
she?
indeed. And the director also made another wonderful documentary called Diana Vreeland, The Eye Has to Travel, about the incredibly influential fashion magazine editor. I don't ordinarily care about this stuff, but it's terrific. She was well on her way to compiling the visuals and the interviews for this doc when she located the tape recordings of the last series of interviews Peggy gave in the late 1970s before she died. And so magically, Peggy Guggenheim narrates her own life story from beyond the grave.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Well, we'll leave you with a clip from Peggy Guggenheim, Art Addict. Thanks again to our film critic, Lisa Nesselson. For more arts and culture news, head to our website and connect with us on social media. Stay with us here on France 24. Lots more coming up after this.
What do these pictures mean to you yourself?
Oh, they've become more or less the most important part of my life. I can't imagine now living without them.
She made it as a collector, and as a kind of collector that never quite existed before.
She wanted this art as a mirror for her own strangeness.
The Guggenheims progressed from selling door to door to having these enormous fortunes.
She actually helped artists to leave Europe to the United States, so she very much saved artists.
You could have wound up in a concentration camp.
Yes, I know that.